You will not believe what happened in this mental hospital. The evil displayed by people can sometimes reach incomprehensible levels, but a barbarity similar to Bayberry Deacon has rarely been seen before. Here is the Bayberry Mental Hospital, a place where evil comes into being, and the blood-chilling events experienced by the patients. Bayberry Mental Hospital, or officially known as Philadelphia. The state hospital was founded in 1903 to treat a small number of patients. It was initially designed as a small facility. However, this small facility gained the function of a real hospital with the construction of new buildings. Thus, an influx of patients began to come here from other mental hospitals in the region. While Bayberry Mental Hospital was growing rapidly in quantity, it was also growing in quality. It could not develop at the same rate. It did not have enough staff to take care of the crowded patient population. For this reason, hospital administrators had to employ many unqualified people. Of course, there were employees who did their job properly, but unfortunately they were not a group. Nearly 3,000 conscientious anti-war resistors are in mental hospitals across the country. Some of them joined the Bayberry staff. Thus, the working staff of the hospital took its final form. The terrible events that took place in the Bayberry Mental Hospital would come to light thanks to the efforts of these people. Due to the insufficient number of personnel and mostly pure evil, extremely poor conditions were offered to the patients in the mental hospital. Patients were often not washed, and the rooms, beds, corridors, and floors were almost never cleaned. As if all this was not enough, the caregivers imprisoned the patients in cells for months. For example, the patient named William Chris Ich Bayberry also spent 14 months of the 3 years he stayed in these cells. Fortunately, in the following period, the district court allowed him to leave the hospital for the crisis. His lawyer said the following about the poor man's situation. "I hope the state has not injured this young man irreparably. It was much better than he came here 7, 8 years ago. The crisis was in no way possible. He managed to escape from the evil mental hospital. However, there were patients much more unfortunate than him. From the establishment of the mental hospital until the 1970s, it was much better than him. At least 57 patients lost their lives due to poor care and neglect, and it is thought that many more were never reported. On the other hand, patients were encouraged to escape, and doors that were supposed to be locked and under control were deliberately left open. For this reason, other people living in the area where the hospital was located were afraid of mentally ill patients. They were found wandering around or sleeping in a corner. Some patients committed suicide after going out. A patient who escaped from the hospital in February wanted to return to the hospital after a while, but this time he was not allowed in. The unfortunate person froze to death at the door of Bayberry Mental Hospital on a February day in 1946. The horrific details of water therapy were described in the newspaper called Philadelphia. The caregiver wets a towel and begins to strangle the patient. He pulls on the towel with all his strength. He rotates the towel one by one to get the reaction of the patients. Meanwhile, the patient begs for mercy, but the attendant continues to squeeze the towel. The patient's eyes swell. His breathing gradually slows down. Finally, the patient's breathing slows down. His body slowly falls on the bed. There is a terrible whiteness on the patient's face. His breathing is completely stopped. Water treatment in the mental hospital in Bayberry did not leave physical traces on the patients. For this reason, it was a torture method frequently used by the caregivers. Moreover, according to a conscientious prescription later, the caregivers were beating the patients and enduring other tortures. They were taking precautions to hide physical traces. For example, the hospital's evil staff found ways to torture patients by giving them medication and leaving them without medication. They were performing surgical operations on patients without using anesthesia. When they needed it, they were denying the simplest painkiller to a patient. Psychiatrists who worked for a short time in Bayberry thought that schizophrenic patients did not suffer. On the other hand, the hospital staff was torturing the patients by forcing them to take drugs. The pharmaceutical company Simit Clean French had a laboratory inside the hospital. The company founded the company before putting its drugs on the market. They were testing them on patients here. Patients were forced to volunteer for drug trials under torture. As a result, hundreds of patients lost their lives in Bayberry Mental Hospital due to drug trials. After the staff brutally massacred the patients, murder cases began to occur among the patients. There were no measures to prevent the out-of-place Russian patients from harming each other. Bayberry continued its activities until 1990, despite its bad reputation throughout the country. It took years of struggle with the efforts and documents of conscientious rappers, some employees and patients to escape from the hospital. Then, Byberry Mental Hospital was closed on June 21, 1990. The history of Byberry Mental Hospital was like this. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video. Goodbye to see you in other videos.